It's been a little bit of a mixed bag, though, Skip. Early in his career, obviously, he was on his way to an MVP possibly. In Week 14, he gets hurt out here in Los Angeles. He tears his ACL, but he set the Philadelphia Eagles up for success
Did he?
to go on and put themselves in prime position to win the Super Bowl.
Nick Foles,
the MVP. But he set him up. He set him up because they won those games with him at the quarterback position. He didn't get the necessary credit because once a narrative is set about you and your personality, and if you're liked in a locker room and all the stuff, the guy who won the Super Bowl is going to be the backup quarterback is the most beloved guy in sports. Everybody loves a backup quarterback. And then he goes on in the Philly special, and he wins the Super Bowl. He gets the MVP. Now, all of a sudden, there's this narrative that's set about Carson Wentz and who he is. Teammates don't like him. He's pouting. But just 6 months prior to that, they give you a $100 million deal because they think you can play. You can play. That's why they gave you the money. They didn't give you the money because you're tall and you got a strong arm. They gave you the money because you actually could play the position.
Yep.
So now he's shipped off to Indianapolis for a bag of popcorn and some now laters, basically, right, Skip? And so you look at him and you go, yeah, he's okay in Indy. He wasn't bad. He did some goofy stuff.
He did.
He did goofy stuff in Indy, but he wasn't bad. He wasn't bad like people tried to make him out to be. But that carries over from his Philadelphia days. Then he goes from there, he goes to Washington. Come on. The Washington had a quarterback since Kirk Cousins, did what he did in Washington.
I'm not sure they had a quarterback then, but go ahead.
I mean, he played himself into a payday with Minnesota. It didn't work out. So everybody's like, Carson Wentz, he's terrible. Because they already had set a narrative about who he was from his Philadelphia days. So he never was going to get a true, in my opinion, a true evaluation of people. He just wasn't. Then he goes to the Rams last year. Whatever, he comes in late, kind of did the Baker Mayfield thing.
He did.
He comes in week 18. He wins that game against the 49ers that didn't have a lot to play for.
No.
But he still delivered the football in sync, threw for 100 and whatever, 60-some-odd yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. They won the football game.
They did.
Now, Big Red in Kansas City said, we need a backup. He's our number one guy, but we need a backup. So we're going to bring him in, and he's going to learn how to play the position. Now, at the end, it's a mixed bag. Do I personally think if he's given an opportunity and a chance to play again an extended period of time, he'll be a starter in the National Football League again? Because I still think he can play football. I don't get caught up in the narrative about somebody. I can look at a dude and tell he can play. He can play. He's got to change some things. Maybe there's some attitude. Maybe there's this look in his face, Skip, that people don't like. But he actually can play football. You can't tell me he's not one of the better quarterbacks in the national, not one of the top quarterbacks, but you can't tell me he ain't at the back end of the starting quarterbacks in the National Football League.
No,
I'm never going to buy that.
Not that.
I'm not going to buy that.
All I know is I would not want him as my starting quarterback.
I understand.
And I was on the record early with him. I just don't like his poise under fire. I don't like the way he plays the position. I tell you this all the time. This is all off television. I'm just watching your command of the position, your feel for it. Too often, he got to be deer in headlights under fire. I started calling him Carson Wentz, as in W-I-N-C-E, as in, ooh, I wince when he drops back because I'm not sure what he's going to do next. If you want to talk about tangibles and measurables, he's got them at the top of the charts. That's why he went second overall in the draft. He is, what do they give him, 6'4" or 6'5",
He's
maybe?
big.
He is a big human being with a big arm, and he is pretty athletic for his size.
Yes.
He can move around, and he can run a little. I'm not saying he's Lamar, but he can run around a little bit. So all of these offensive minds, starting with Doug Peterson, look at this and say, boy, I can work with that. Frank Reich said, I can work with that.
He helped them go to the Super Bowl,
they got on a roll,
Coach.
and it was there's a little bit miraculous run that he was on. That team was loaded.
He had been on a miraculous run since he came into the NFL, though, Skip.
All right. But Nick Foles, you sort of characterize him as a backup quarterback. He really was a starting quarterback because he had started for Philadelphia under Chip Kelly and been pretty good. I don't know if you remember that, but he was pretty good.
He had a good season.
Yeah, he did. Then he went to St. Louis, and he didn't have a very good season, but he goes back there as the backup quarterback. And when they got on a roll, that team loved him to the point that they're building shrines in the locker room to Nick Foles, right? Yeah. Because he's a good guy. He's a fun guy to play for.
Right place, right time, right fit.
Everything worked. And then the stories started to come out about Carson Wentz's personality. And to the media, he seemed like a good guy, the nice guy next door, said all the right things. And then they said behind closed doors, he could be a little prickly. He could be a little tough. He could be a little difficult, and that they didn't particularly care for him. So Frank Reich says, I can work with that. And to your point, he had some moments in Indy.
They didn't have a running game. It was fine.
But he did do some deer in headlights, goofy stuff.
Some stupid stuff.
Yeah,
well, you're like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Here, you take the ball. I don't want it. Like,
there you go. And then he goes to Scott Turner, North's son in Washington, and they try. And trust me, I didn't fear him when Dallas played them because the team wasn't very good, to your point. Good. And then Sean McVay says, I think I could work with that, just the way he thought he could work with Baker, and he did for a little while. And so they had a little bit of success at the end of the year. So now he sits out there for a long time in free agency with no takers. And finally, Andy says, you know what? I can work with that because he's got the whole package. When you're looking at the measurables, you can't get much better. I mean, his arm, I'll bet you it's about as strong as Patrick's is, just on pure arm strength.
He in 2017, he got injured, and he really never was the same.
No.
And you talk about his personality inside the locker room and all those sort of things. One of the worst kept secrets in the National Football League is that the quarterbacks aren't sensitive.
Aren't or are sensitive?
Oh, I mean, are sensitive.
Are sensitive, yes.
Yeah. No matter what the case is.
Agreed.
When you all of a sudden are drafting Jalen Hurts in a situation, dudes are gonna feel a certain way. They hear it before it even happens. That, they may be looking at a quarterback. They may be looking at a quarterback next year. They're already hearing this in the course of the season. Before you shipped off, they already feeling the heat. They're going to be sensitive across the board. They say that the receivers are the divas. No, the damn quarterbacks are the divas.
Well, sure.
In the worst position.
They deserve to be.
Well, you can say the receivers deserve to be. Just because they play the position of quarterback.
You're dependent upon that guy, right?
Yeah, but they also depended upon us, too.
That has become more the factor of late.
That's the reality of it, but they give them such a pass.
Yeah.
So my whole point of saying this is, I'm not surprised that behind closed doors, he might have been difficult to deal with. Because every quarterback I've ever played with in my 11 years, and it was about 18 of them, and even some of them was so bad, they still had attitudes. So it just, I'm not surprised by it at all. I think personally, though, the dude under the right person in the right situation can play the position.
Yeah. Okay, so the moment that the Philadelphia Eagles, Howie Roseman, took Jalen Hurts in the second round, I tweeted immediately, he will change life in Philadelphia, and he'll soon be better than Carson Wentz.
And he did.
Because he's the flip side of Carson Wentz. He's more intangible than tangible. Jalen had to go fix his throwing motion, and he came out here with Tom House at USC, and he did just that. And he turned himself into an MVP candidate. I know they fell on their faces down the stretch and lost 6 out of 7, but we saw him lift that team to the Super Bowl, and I don't think Carson Wentz could do that. So the other problem Carson Wentz has, as you point out, once you go through failures, it's like they call a shot fighter, where you just lose your. I'm talking about a boxer. You just lose your confidence. You just get.
It needs to be
take
built
too many
back
shots, right? And maybe Big Red, who's very good at this. Nobody can coach that position better than Andy can. It just depends on how much do they need him. Last year they did not need Blaine Gabbert at all until the last game when they didn't play anybody.
Well, I don't think they've ever. I don't think. As I can remember, I don't think that Patrick Mahomes has ever missed a game.
They need the Henne given Sunday game when they needed Chad
But he didn't miss the
Baker
game.
Mayfield.
He just got a couple plays.
Yes, in the game.
I don't think he's ever missed a game since he started quarterback. I don't ever
check that out, but
I don't think so. It's always been questionable. Is he going to play? What's wrong with his ankle leading up to the week? And then all of a sudden he plays.
Yeah.
So I don't ever think that Carson Wentz is going to see any significant amount of playing time. But what you can do is it's a one-year deal, number one. What you could do is you could get with Andy Reid, who is the real quarterback fixer of all quarterback fixers I've ever laid eyes on in the National Football League. There's a lot of guys that they claim are quarterback fixers. I ain't gonna mention no names, but in the end, they really not. If he could just learn and follow Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and Matt Nagy to a degree, that one-year deal is up. He now could go sign with a team that is in a situation a la, no, it won't be Pittsburgh, but something like a Pittsburgh that needs a quarterback.
Maybe.
And now he goes in there and competes for the starting job. I think he can do that.
Okay. I'm not saying this is old for the quarterback position, but he will play. He'll turn 32 in December. And it shocked me when I looked that up.
It shocked me when you just said it.
Because it's like he's that old, but he is. He's 31 going on 32. This will be his 9th year in the NFL. But it's also going to be Dak Prescott's 9th year because they're in the same draft.
How did this get back to Dak?
Well, I mean, he was the 4th-round pick out of the same draft, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's had a better career than Carson Wentz.
Okay, he has. No, I give you that. And Jared Goff was the 1st overall pick who's had a pretty good career and better than Carson Wentz.
Yeah, he has a better career than Carson Wentz. About even, in my opinion, about even with Dak.
Well, who, Jared?
Yeah, about even with Dak. He's gone further than Dak Prescott on 2 different teams. Yeah. Rams in the Super Bowl, NFC Championship game with Detroit.
Okay, and he did beat Dak in a playoff game for what it's worth.
And he beat Dak in a playoff game for what it's worth.
All right. So much for Carson Wentz. Okay, we got to get back to what happened last night. The most watched women's game ever, no doubt. Angel Reese was in the spotlight. She spoke out after last night's game, and we react next. Thanks for watching, Undisputed fans. Do you want more highlights from the show? Make sure to click that subscribe button for all the exclusive content from Undisputed.